Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor John Ward, leader of Babergh District Council, and I will be chairing this meeting. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Finally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please can members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I'll now move to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Milvisi.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interest by members. Are there any to declare, members? Okay, thank you. Item 3, paper BCA 2224, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of September 2022. So I'll just go through them page by page. So on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and I understand there that there is one correction in item 46.6, where it says the Cabinet Member for the Environment. It should say Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Transport. And lastly, page 10. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, sorry, yeah, page 7 of the report, 42.5. The last paragraph, she ensured, it should be assured, members that the government would be fully informed of the rent situation. That should be that members will be fully informed of the rent situation.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Okay. If there are no further questions, may I have a proposer, please? Councillor McLaren, seconder. Councillor Gould. Okay. Take the vote for the minutes, please.
Thank you, members. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That's 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees. Councillor Hinton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing was actually referred to us, but we were asked to comment on the joint parking strategy, and it was also felt that we ought to comment on the council tax reduction working age scheme. On Friday the 30th of September, joint overview and scrutiny met and over a period of about 2 hours discussed the parking strategy in some detail. Joint overview and scrutiny welcomes the parking strategy and has the following comments. Members express concern over the uncertainty in predicting parking capacity and expressing the need to update predictions of car use and car park use as the project moves into the implementation phase. There were queries over the governance of parking strategy implementation and a request that the business case for the implementation plan be made available for scrutiny at an appropriate time. Also, information bulletins at key stages of the implementation phase. The collected data shows that some 40 to 50% of journeys to a car park are 1.5 miles or less. The strategy needs to encourage implementation of proposals to discourage car use by providing opportunities for journeys to be undertaken by other means. This will involve working with partners, including Suffolk County Council and the Sustainable Travel Officer. Members asked why there was no data on problem areas and suggested producing a heat map showing reported instances of enforcement and issuing of penalty notice charges in hotspot areas. Emphasis needs to be made on trip reduction, not increasing the number of car parking spaces. The strategy seems to accept that spend in town centres increases when on-street parking is permitted. Officers should be asked to review case studies conducted in towns where the reverse has been shown to be the case. Members expressed concern about the lack of flexibility in the strategy. Data was collected before the sharp increase in fuel prices and the cost of living crisis. Transport to school often leads to on-street parking. A strategy for reducing the problems caused by parent parking needs to be developed, probably with Suffolk County Council. Members suggested that work is needed to investigate the often unsatisfactory parking of vehicles for car and van sharing, particularly along the A14 corridor. And I would like to add, it happens elsewhere as well. Members agreed that the strategy has a limited scope as most car parking spaces are under the control of others, especially on-street parking. Something like 90% of the parking within the two districts is controlled by the County Council because it's effectively on-street parking. Members are not persuaded that the strategy could be used to influence planning policy. Those were the agreed concerns of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to bring forward to both cabinets.
Thank you, Councillor Hinton. Members of the Cabinet, do any of you have any questions for Councillor Hinton or any comments on anything he has said? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little bit surprised, actually, that scrutiny haven't identified the issue that we've got on parking on our green verges and on our open space. I listened very carefully, so I apologise if I've missed it, but I didn't hear that there. Nor also, and I'm going to raise a question when we go into questions for Cabinet, on the need for a lorry park to replace the current one that we've got in Sudbury. So they're just two, it's more a statement really than a question. I'm surprised that scrutiny didn't pick up on those two really important issues.
Scrutiny, we're looking at the process rather than the actual detailed content of the proposals, which is what they only are required to do. There was a lot of discussion about things like on-verge parking, etc. But a lot of it was outside of the control of the District Council and therefore outside the scope of overview and scrutiny to influence the production of a strategy.
Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just repeat your last sentence that you read, Councillor Hinton, please, from Overview and Scrutiny? I didn't quite catch it.
That on-street parking, which includes verges, is within the remit of the County Council as the Highways Authority and not within the remit of the District Council, and therefore was outside the scope of Overview and Scrutiny to actually comment on the formation of a strategy concerning it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Hinton, thank you for that. Those are all very helpful, and I think we'll be able to take some of those forward and work on.
If I can just add one point, Mr. Chairman, and that is on the point about car and van sharing, particularly along the A14 corridor. This is becoming an increasing problem, and when you look at the car parking provision, off-street car parking provision across the districts, the vast majority of it is in parish-owned car parks that are associated with village halls, etc. And if they are filled up with people parking there to then go off in a joint car down to somewhere else, it causes a major problem when they have events on, in terms of providing adequate parking for the people using the village halls.
Because those spaces are taken up all day
But it's
long.
it's not included within this. The only off-street car parkings that are included are the ones owned by the district councils.
I understand. No, that is, I accept that as an omission, and we do need to incorporate that. Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Hinton. Thank you. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the recommendations made by overview and scrutiny, I'm just trying to sort of apply them as to how they could be used within the recommendations in the report main. And it seems to me that particularly the third point, I'm just going to move between the two documents, with the second and third points about further work, demands for alternatives, and that a report and due progress reports be supplied. It seems to me that those could easily be accommodated within the third recommendation in front of us in the main papers, which I have lost for a second, because
Yes, thank you, Councillor
you've got
McCraw.
the point.
Yeah, I understand that, and I agree with you there. Thank you. Right. If there are no further questions, then we will move on to the next item. So it's item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. Does anyone have any comments on the forthcoming decisions list? Nope. Excellent. Right. We're moving on then to the next item, item 8, which is paper BCA 2225, the Babergh and Mid-Suffolk Parking Strategy 2022 to 2042. Unfortunately, the Cabinet Member for the Environment, Councillor Malvisi, can't be with us today. She is suffering from the flu, and so you've got me introducing the report on her behalf. I'm pleased to introduce the Babergh and Mid-Suffolk Parking Strategy 2022 to 2042 to provide a joined-up strategy that covers not just the details of on-street and off-street provision, but also the economic, environmental and community impacts of parking. It also needs to incorporate how parking can play its part in our response to the climate emergency by encouraging changes to car use. The work was commissioned following the Cabinet decision in August 2021, and it builds upon previous work, the Joint Area Parking Management Plan, which was prepared 4 years ago in the run-up to the implementation of civil parking enforcement, and which provides detail on how the Suffolk Parking Management Strategy will be implemented locally, and the Parking Study Report, prepared in 2021, which documents all aspects of the current parking provision. This strategy is, of course, very wide-ranging and has taken 14 months to prepare. There have been a number of stages: investigation and data collection, member and town and parish council briefings, public engagement, analysis of the data and engagement feedback, and preparation of the strategy with its recommendations. The strategy is designed to help support our vision for Babergh and Mid-Suffolk, which is to build great communities with bright and healthy futures that everyone is proud to call home, by shaping the future growth of the districts, enhancing the quality of the local environment, as well as providing a prospectus for investment through regeneration of our town centres and rural villages. The parking strategy is a key means of enhancing our already strong and vibrant districts and reinforces the importance of everyone having access to sufficient, safe and easy-to-use parking facilities for cars and other vehicles at suitable hours of the day or night. The strategy at a high level needs to identify parking demand and supply for the next 20 years. It needs to reflect national guidance as it applies to both the future of town centres and commuting patterns, reflect the changing needs of transport and so far as this is possible, anticipate patterns of demand, and most importantly be capable of adaptation. The detail of why, how and what we will do to make this a reality is explained in the document. At the heart of this strategy is the principle that there is sufficient parking provision for all in appropriate locations to ensure the success of our communities and the local economy and to enhance the quality of the environment. The strategy contains recommendations that we believe can bring real change to how we travel and how we deliver the wider ambitions for our communities and places. Today in front of you we have a number of reports attached to the Cabinet paper. There's a concise version of the strategy at Appendix A, a detailed report at Appendix B, the 2021 parking study at Appendix C, and the consultation feedback reports at Appendices D and D. And finally, I'd like to thank all involved in the production of this very comprehensive and impressive strategy. The Cabinet Member for the Environment, Councillor Mavisi, her predecessor, Councillor Dawson, who worked on the foundations of the strategy, and of course our officers, and finally 2020 Consultancy. They've all played a part and have all worked really hard to produce an excellent document. So therefore I'm pleased to propose the recommendations in section 3 of the report, and I'd like to ask for a seconder. Councillor McCraw. Members of the Cabinet, are there any questions? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I've already alluded to the need for a lorry park, and I've raised it on several occasions that we do need a relocated lorry park. You've got the issues now with the one on the A14 is closing down, and also there's huge problems down Churchfield Road in Sudbury and the surrounding areas, and some of the rural areas surrounding Sudbury as well. So we do need a new lorry park, and I know that officers promised us that we would have some information on that, so I'm hoping something is forthcoming today before we approve this strategy. And the other one is open space, and I appreciate that you've made it much more robust now in the strategy, which is good. But I would ask the question on how do we propose to get these concerns addressed with the considerable parking on open space and green areas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll try, and then I'll probably bring in some colleagues to give a little bit more information. So in terms of the lorry park, I think we have added some additional information into the public pack report with regard to lorry parking. I think the sort of long-term strategic piece and the immediate issues are kind of slightly different things. So we are in the process of having, or trying to set up a meeting with the County Council to talk about the kind of immediate issues. The longer term issues, I might just defer to my colleagues because I think there's a sort of slightly longer strategic conversation that is happening with regard to a strategy around lorry parking and activities. So if I can defer to Sarah or Sharon, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you ever so much. So we have spoken, or we are speaking with Suffolk County Council, who are also reviewing Suffolk-wide lorry parking facilities and also the travel routes throughout Suffolk that the lorry drivers may need to take, and making sure that areas in which we have current lorry parks at the moment are identified. So it is going to lead on to further work. So we have in it's within your public pack on page 84 is 8.8 of the update outlined the need for lorry parks to be reviewed following our last briefing session, and also ask Suffolk County Council to keep us informed on their work that they're doing with their local transport plan also, so that we understand what the picture looks forward as we move forward with our implementation plan. We can make sure we include the correct links within our documents, and so our parking strategy along with their transport plan are joined up and also take into the needs of lorry drivers and the facilities that they may need. Thank you.
And then I'll pick up on the verge parking, if I may. So yeah, following the Cabinet briefing, we updated both the strategy summary and the strategy report to incorporate a reference to open space parking. With regards to the implementation plan, there will be an absolute need for further work, further conversations with yourselves as councillors and town and parish councils to identify specific locations across the district where open space parking is causing a problem. So yeah, we will work closely with yourselves and other officers across the organisation to bring that about through the implementation plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say that creating this report, if it was to be compared to reading it, I think you've done a great job. It's a lot of information, and you've worked really hard at it. I've just got two questions, and I don't know who's going to answer this. Given the interaction with the public, so that was questionnaires and comments made by the public, that was in the region of just over 3,000 people. Given, and that was Mid-Suffolk and Babergh together, I think, given that the total population was 195,000, was that a reasonable response for a survey? So I thought Adam might know the answer to this. Was that a reasonable response for a survey like we've undertaken?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So with parking strategies, it's challenging to sort of put a percentage of how much of the population you should be engaging with. Often those that are getting involved are ones that sort of have a particular interest over it. So to sort of allocate a percentage against the population, I would say is challenging. What I would say is that I've been involved in well over 30 parking strategies across the country, and this is by some distance the highest engagement rate that we've ever had, by some distance. And the feedback that we had was from a variety of different age groups, from different areas across the two districts. So the sample size was excellent in terms of sort of the feedback that we had. So from our perspective, it met all the sort of the criteria that we was looking to as part of that engagement process.
So, thank you, Adam. My second question is probably for Fiona, really. Fiona, you know what a supporter I am of the virtual high street. With that sort of developing over COVID and all of that, has that impacted the footfall in Hadley and Sudbury?
We don't actually have sort of footfall counters in either of those towns, so it's quite difficult to say in detailed terms what the impact is likely to be. I think when it relates back to parking, though, I'm not sure that we've seen any particular impact on parking changes. So I think very much anecdotally, people are still very much coming into the high street and doing their shopping. I think the virtual high street is as is intended, is a complementary measure which can allow people to trade online as well as having their high street. So it's a sort of boost for their high street presence. So we're not anticipating that it should have an impact significantly on parking.
Yeah, well, that's reassuring because we wouldn't want to implement something only to find it as a knock-on effect somewhere else. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Claren, and I would agree with that. We don't want the virtual high street to... it's meant to be an addition rather than a replacement for people going into town. And I think that the vastly increased provision of places to have snacks, lunches, coffees, that sort of thing, that's the draw that brings people in, excuse me, so that they will come in and spend time in town and then use the shops. So, and that's the sort of high street we want to see going forward. Any other questions? Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, it's a question for Adam, I think. He just said, I think you said you've completed 30 of these across the country. And just following on from Councillor Osborne's question, I wondered if you would usually pick up the issue of lorry parking or not.
So it's picked up in the sense of it's important for the districts to acknowledge where its position is in terms of the delivery mechanisms. As a local highway authority, responsibility to deliver. So what we are identifying is the need for that liaison with Suffolk County Council and for them to sort of work with Babergh and Mid-Suffolk officers to determine the locations that are suitable for lorry parks, the facilities that are provided, and all the sort of the costs and benefits and business case should be sort of done in terms of sort of cross relationship working. So the acknowledgement is that, yes, it's something that should be picked up, and it's important that that is signposted in both sort of what Babergh and Mid Suffolk are taking forward, but also what Suffolk County Council are also taking forward.
It's not really another question, but I can't help thinking that perhaps we missed a trick, Chairman, when we did this. I think we probably should have highlighted the issue of lorry parking earlier on, because we were aware of it. However, I think this strategy is due for review within 3 to 5 years, and we've already alerted and picked up, and of course the work to provide a new lorry park with facilities will actually take some years to bring to fruition, won't it? Yes.
Okay. I'd just like to ask, again, I don't know who, but I think for reassurances to the general public as well, that this is a living document. It's a 20-year document. We're going to be, well, I wonder if you could just give us a brief run-through of the review process that will take place on the strategy over the next 20 years. We've seen in the last few years already credible changes in transport use. They may have been very short term, a year or two here or there, but when you've got empty roads, for example, as we saw not 2 years ago, and then, you know, within the matter of lockdown ceasing, traffic levels had risen, I think, in Suffolk by 4% on pre-pandemic levels. That's a massive amount of change, and I think it's likely we're going to see further changes. So I just think it would be good to reassure people that this is an ongoing process for till 2042. And could somebody just explain how that will be handled?
I'll certainly pick it up initially. The strategy, you're absolutely right, things are changing all the time. The strategy, as everyone's already pointed out, has had an enormous amount of work and background studies that have gone into it. I don't think we're proposing to update that every year or anything, but I think we're looking at 3 to 5 year review periods over that 20 year. I think whilst today isn't about the implementation plan, obviously the next stage of work, the really important stage of work, is a living and breathing implementation plan, and that as and when business cases are required, we will of course double check background information, current data as part of that business case process. So certainly for those bigger recommendations, it will have very current up-to-date information that feed into the business case. So the strategy will be reviewed fairly regularly, but the implementation plan will be living and breathing.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. I was just in the light of what Councillor McCraw said. Does all this potential moving forward have implications for the resources within the department that's going to deal with this?
Resources in its general sense, as in staff resources and financial resource, yes, it will do, which is why certainly again with those larger recommendations, those bigger schemes, as part of the business case, we'll have to look at the resources that are used. It's probably worth pointing out at this moment, though, that the implementation plan that sits within the strategy and the recommendations, in fact, in the strategy, there's a mix of sort of big and small projects, and some of those smaller projects, which we would hope we can implement very quickly, are not particularly time resource or resource. So hopefully there'll be a blend, but certainly with those bigger projects, as with any big project, we will make sure at the beginning of those projects we do a proper resource review.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Gould.
It's a concern, really, which I can sort of frame as a question. Page 18, 4.7, and it's picked up again in the actual strategy, where it speaks about, and you know, we've heard that the data was collected during August of 21, which was COVID. Is it robust data? Is there an algorithm or a matrix that will make some kind of allowance for the fact that it was a COVID slump?
It's a question that's been raised several times through the process. The need for data collection was predominantly to set baseline data for our forecasting. So it was a sort of an early stage process. What we have sort of worked towards is that, generally speaking, yes, even though there's no actual restrictions in place due to COVID, we're still within that sort of post-COVID world where for a lot of residents, they might not have felt comfortable going to the sort of town centres, etc. So we were expecting to see a reduction potentially. So our threshold in terms of sort of the occupancy rates that we was looking at, we did reduce slightly to sort of take that on board. Alongside that, and this is sort of a generic nationally sort of a bit of research has been carried out that outside of the sort of the pre-Christmas rush. So the summer holidays is traditionally one of the sort of the busier times of the year for car parking usage. So whilst there's likely to be a reduction through that post-COVID situation, there's also likely to be increases in many of the car parks due to the summer holidays when the surveys were carried out.
Thank you. And I guess any vast difference in data will be picked up at the, as you say, Fiona, the implementation stage. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Can I ask as well, the top of page 21, where it actually says, well, top of page 22 really, no, top of page 21. The council may be perceived to be untrustworthy and have a poor reputation. And the bit that concerns me, as you would expect, the council will not be carbon neutral by 2030, which is a bit of a concern. But is that at odds and at variance with page 32, where the Suffolk Climate Change Partnership is saying that Suffolk is hoping to be carbon neutral? I couldn't quite marry up those two sentences in my mind.
The first one's an assessment. The second one is a statement of the actual situation.
Okay. Okay. Yes, thank you, Alistair. Consider that answered.
Thank you, Councillor McGraw. Sorry. That's okay. No, that's right. Are there any further questions? If not, Councillor Busby.
It was a question or item for debate, really. There are going to be elements in here that we won't be able to resolve. Issues which the public may think, because we've got a strategy, we're going to find answers to everything, like parking on verges in council estates or housing estates, where there's little alternative for the residents. What other risks are there, do you think? What other items are there where you think we're not going to be able to find a solution, or if we are, it's going to be a very long-term one?
I think it's going to be me. That's quite a difficult question to answer. I mean, obviously, the strategy is prepared based on the evidence. The evidence has demonstrated and developed a range of recommendations. Some will be easier than others for a range of reasons, and as we've already discussed, times change. So, you know, it might be that we embark upon a particular project only to find conditions change and we can't deliver it. It's very difficult for me at this stage to give you that kind of honest answer about what they're likely to be. But what I would say is that the strategy is based upon the evidence, and it's developed recommendations of what needs to happen, whether that will happen or not. And as I said before, when we get to the individual business cases, there may be valid reasons why we can't do some of that stuff. But as it stands at the moment, the recommendations are what the evidence is telling us. I don't know if Adam wants to come in.
I mean, it's a good example that you raised with the verge parking, because what we've done is this strategy is being developed at a strategic level to cover districts-wide. And once approved, if approved, we'll be looking to apply that at a local level. And with the verge parking, for instance, that's one that potentially might be easier to mitigate in some locations compared to others. And then even within the, sort of those specific locations, there could be different sort of treatments in effect that you'd be looking at. For instance, is verge parking occurring because there's just nowhere else to park, or is it occurring because people are just more convenient parking on the verge because it's closest to where they want to be? So sort of identifying those sort of answers will help then determine sort of the mitigations to that. So what we've identified within the strategy is several of the recommendations are sort of taking what we've identified at this sort of strategic level and then looking to sort of develop more detailed studies which will be more location specific. And by that we should be able to sort of identify those issues, and there's no reason why they can't be sort of risk plans sort of associated with those studies to identify what the risks are and how we can mitigate them. And potentially they can be used, even though it could be sort of location specific, they could be sort of applicable, certainly in terms of the risks in other locations, to sort of determine what can and can't be done. So, as Fiona was saying, it's very difficult to sort of identify what we may or may not be able to sort of resolve in terms of risk, but certainly with those projects that will be sort of needing to go into the greater detail at the location specific basis, I expect for us to be able to sort of resolve the vast majority of them. So whilst we might not be able to do that now, through the development of those sort of studies, we expect to be able to sort of find resolutions to the vast majority, if not all, of those sort of parking related matters.
Really, well, that's good news. I'll be surprised. But and the other thing is, you've had a good response on the surveys. 3,000 odd people, which is fine. And I think Mary said there's 195,000 people in there. It might be the 3,000 people that are desperate to get parking sorted out. The other 192,000 might be desperate for parking not to be sorted out, i.e. for people to sort out bikes and pedestrians and buses rather than pamper to the car. Have you taken that into consideration?
Thank you, Councillor Busby. So our parking strategy does link very closely with the LC WIP and the Sustainable Travel Vision. There are also sections within the strategy that touch on the highways infrastructure, so public transport, for example, and we also consider those that may walk or cycle into those town and village locations as well. So when we talk about parking and improvement of parking, we're also looking at motorcycles. There's a section in there around motorhomes as well, and the potential for coach parking and also car clubs and sort of sharing car services. So I think, as Adam alluded to earlier, whilst it is that strategic level, there is very much it's a piece of a wider jigsaw. Thank you.
In terms of your initial question about areas which are going to be more difficult to implement, I guess that there are three, and one of which is the modal shift and encouraging that, and that's going to take some time and will involve other organisations, particularly the County Council and bus operators. But also, for instance, increasing parking provision when we reach or exceed thresholds for the use of car parks in certain locations. That's not going to be an easy one to address. And thirdly, I think residents on-street parking provision, where in some streets that there is already contention for residents' places, and that's not going to be an easy one either. So I think those are three that we do realise are going to be difficult and will require time, money, and working with others. Councillor McCraw, did you have a question?
It's less of the specific to this report and more for information for all members of the Council and the Cabinet, and particularly to Dave Busby's question about risk management, because risk management has recently been transferred from being an audit function into my portfolio, which is customers and digital transformation, and a complete review of the risk management across the Council's operations is taking place. A new risk management register, risk management approach, a more systematic approach, and less purely the financial approach that was previously the case when it was considered purely under audit. We know that there are financial risks to be managed, but we also know that there are others that we've just been referring to, reputational as mentioned in the papers and so on. So I just thought I'd throw that in as a general piece of information, because I think it's going to become, each directorate will be part of the risk management process, dealing directly with my directorate to pull it all together and apply a consistent approach across the board rather than a piecemeal one. I just hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor. We're kind of moving into debate now, which is no bad thing. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a quick question. We've been talking about grass verges. Now, this comes up in planning applications, and the question I was going to put to perhaps Fiona or the team, is there some possible future link of this strategy with planning applications? Because certainly most of the applications that I've sat in on, there's always been some concern that parking has been insufficient on the development and grass verges. So is that a possibility or not?
Don't know if Sharon wants to come in after me, but certainly we see this document being very similar to the local walking and transport, walking and cycling infrastructure plan that we've developed, which will enable us to have very early conversations with planning officers about specific schemes at that pre-application stage. And that seems to be working really well from the LC WIP perspective. So we anticipate doing the same thing with this strategy. It sort of sets a direction of travel that will enable us to have those conversations at the earliest possible stage when major applications come in.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, so moving into debate, does anyone wish to have any comments, any observations? Councillor Gould, then Councillor Osborne.
It's an observation, really. I chuckled a bit to hear that, or I read somewhere, that car parks potentially overnight could be used as a drive-in cinema. I thought, oh, that's really innovative.
Although we're back to the 1950s.
I wouldn't know.
I've seen Saturday Night Fever. I've seen the films, okay?
So I thought that was a wonderful idea. And also the idea to possibly allow motorhomes parking space overnight. So well done, whoever came up with those. I thought they were great.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, I know that this is a strategy that's really been long anticipated. There's a lot of expectancy coming out of it. And I really want to thank all the time and effort that officers I know have put into this. I think it's a really good document. And also members of the public that have made comments into it that have been useful and productive, I'm sure, in producing this strategy itself. I'm really pleased that we've taken the incentive to drive a strategy forward. We didn't have to, because if you look at the action plan, a lot of it is down to Suffolk County Council. So there again, I'm going to make a point that I do really hope that Suffolk County Council come up trumps on this one and work with us to deliver this, because otherwise the delivery plan will fall flat on its face. And as I've said to officers before, actually the proof of the pudding in this strategy is going to be in the delivery of the action plan. So I look forward to seeing that happening. But I just want to thank officers for all the time that they've put into it. I think it's an excellent strategy. And I'm looking forward to our grass verges being clear of cars parked on them, and then Councillor Beer will give me a bit of a rest on that one at every full council that we come to. But no, seriously, that is a real issue and one that does need to be addressed. And Councillor McLaren is absolutely right. We need to address it in the planning stage. How many developments do we see come forward where they've got some lovely green open space, but it's kept unprotected from the risk of cars or vans being allowed, or lorries come to that, being allowed to park on it. So I do hope that this strategy really drives forward decisions that are being made at planning as well. So thank you, officers, for all your hard work. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Busby.
In anything, there's going to be things that you can do in a short term and things that are going to take a long time. As the portfolio holder for finance, I hope you're going to find some that are going to generate income or going to be cost neutral. Otherwise, you might not find that there's unanimous support for this strategy.
That's a fair comment, Councillor Busby. We know that any improvement has to, if at all possible, fund itself. So income generation is always something that we need to look to at the council. It's an increasing part of our overall income, and when it comes to parking, that's no different from any other service that's essentially discretionary rather than statutory service. So we will look forward to that in the future. Any other comments?
Well, just one last thing. Can I just thank Alistair for his information on risk management and risk analysis. As Emily knows, I'm a real fan of risk management and risk analysis, and please send me anything that you've got on it.
I'm happy to do that, actually, and as soon as I've worked out how it works myself, I know I have got some experience, but I mean, we are literally developing the strategy, the risk management spreadsheets. I have a meeting later this month. Be happy to keep you in the loop.
Okay, well, if that's it, we'll move to the vote in a minute, but I would like to once again say thank you to everyone involved in producing this. Fiona, Sarah, Sharon, and of course Adam from 2020 Consultancy. Thank you all. It's an excellent document. There's a massive amount of information in here, particularly the response from the public feedback and the analysis of that, which makes for very interesting reading. And also encouraging, because it is quite clear that members of the public do understand the issues at play here and are reasonable in what they want to see going forward, and they know that we need to do things, but they also understand that a lot of this may not necessarily be what everyone would like to see, but they realise that it's necessary to make sure we've got the right sort of parking provision in the district for the next 20 years. So thank you all for that. Okay then, we'll move on to the vote, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress. Chair, that is 7 votes for, and that's unanimous.
Thank you. Okay then, moving on to the next item. Item 9, paper BCA 2226, exemption of right to buy receipts for new council housing from pooling. And I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments to introduce this report. Councillor Busby, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think this is going to be very short because I think the paper is very clear. By applying for the exemption, it gives us flexibility in how we use right to buy receipts, and there are no downsides. The current right to buy rules are very restrictive. Having the exemption would allow us to spend the receipts on affordable housing, regeneration projects, or repaying HRA debt. The scope that we're looking at the end of March this year, just over 200 houses qualified for this exemption. How many will qualify, of course, we don't know, because we don't know how many right to buy sales are going to be going forward. But to me, this is one of those things that we should accept very gratefully, and therefore I propose we approve the exemption application and ask for a second. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the Cabinet, any questions? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this was introduced on the 1st of April 2022, and we're now 6 months down the line. So I'm just wondering if there's any monies we've lost by this not being approved back in April, unless my understanding is correct and there's a retrospect where we can go back to 2008.
Yeah, I can take this one. Thank you for your question. So there is a retrospective application, so we can go back and apply for that retrospectively to move those receipts. It doesn't change the amount for capital receipts that we will receive, so we won't get any additional back for it, but we'll have more flexibility in how we use that. So rather than have to use it for a one-for-one replacement, we can use it for any purpose that we wish.
I mean, it helps. The right to buy scheme has positively skewed against us in the past, and it was a ridiculous scheme. How we were supposed to produce a one-for-one, like-for-like replacement when the government managed to take away most of the funds that we got from selling the house. So this is a small step in trying to get that corrected, I think.
Questions? No? Anyone wish to make any comments in debate? You want to move to the vote?
Yeah,
Okay, we'll
move to
move
the
to the vote.
Sorry, you're too quick for me there. The vote is now in progress. That is 7 votes for. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Item 10, paper BCA 2227, the council tax reduction working age scheme 2023 to 2024, and this is the consultation for this. And I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments to introduce the report. Councillor Busby again.
Thanks. Well, this may be even shorter, maybe not, but Henriette, get ready for the vote. With anything like this, we should be aiming for maximum benefits with minimum costs. Increasing the maximum from 95% to 100% is good for the people that are in need. And simplifying the UC scheme under options 2 or 3 should do this, and also make it cheaper for us to administer. So I think anything where you can get a benefit and have the benefit paid for by efficiency is good news. Scheme 3 will probably be slightly more expensive than Scheme 2 or option 2, but it does protect those households that would be worse off under the simplified scheme. So I would propose that we do go for option 3 and that we agree to go out to consultation on that. And I ask for a second on that. Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this 100%, absolutely. My question is, with option 3, there aren't going to be any people that miss out on this, are there? Does it make sure that we cover all groups? Because sometimes we do a recommendation on an option and then there's a few that fall into the gaps. So is there any that fall into this one?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can actually answer that question without going back to SRP just to double check on that analysis. But obviously, once we've done the consultation, we'll bring back more of that rounded data and that complete data to show you if there are any people that fall out. So we've got that complete data.
I think with the extra provisions in option 3 over and above the option 2, with the additional people that will be caught by option 3, it probably reduces that number to pretty much 0, but obviously it'd be useful to get SRP's analysis on that. Thank you. Councillor McCraw.
This, after all, is just to go to consultation, not to make the final decision, so effectively there's no reason for any delay whatsoever. When it comes back, then we make the decision, but we're looking to provide cover to a greater extent for, and it's not a very large number of people. We don't want it to be a large number of people, but there should be something, a safety net, and the safety net should be, well, should have as few holes in it as possible.
Okay, well, we kind of moved into debate there again. Does anyone else have any further comments on this? Oh, Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. No, I think it's to be welcomed, actually. And looking at the other age from a cost of living crisis perspective in communities, looking how that's going to help other agencies that work with us, I think is to be welcomed. And I think the SRP costs, that in itself, I mean, I'm amazed how much money we're going to possibly save. So, yes, I'm all for this scheme.
That's certainly an important consideration, the savings there, and especially if Babergh, Mid Suffolk and Ipswich all do the same thing. That's only to be welcome. Okay then, we'll move to the vote. Oh, you got another question? Jan's already second. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please, Henriette.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress. Thank you. That is 7 votes for, and that's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was the last item. Before I close the meeting, I just wanted to say a few words about our monitoring officer. I'm not going to repeat everything I said earlier, but I just want to say we are sadly losing our monitoring officer, Emily Ewell. She has been an excellent monitoring officer for the two councils. She'll be greatly missed. I don't know how we're going to find somebody so good, but we will have to do so. But she does have a well-deserved and a great opportunity to further her career, and I think we all wish her the very best for the future. But thank you for everything you've done for us, Emily, and I hope you have a great time in your new job. And with that, I will close the meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for the 7th of November, 2 p.m.